everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today we are doing probably the most fun, but also the video that feels like the most pressure, which is my best books of the year for 2025. I always have such a hard time really picking like which were the best of the entire year, but it's also so fun to talk about like the best things that I read. So let's get into it. I am going to start with an honorable mention because it was a reread, but that is The Lost Queen by Signe Pike. Really, it's The Lost Queen and The Forgotten Kingdom, the first two books in this trilogy. I reread them this year so that I could read the third book that came out recently. It may have come out in 2024, but I read it in 25. Anyways, my reread of these first two books was so fun. I mean, I already know that I love Signe Pike's writing, her characters. I think her writing in particular is so just like atmospheric and lovely to read, and I loved my reread of these first two books, so this is an honorable mention. But let's get into my top books of the year. These aren't really in any particular order other than I think maybe my last two are kind of tied for best, but I'm gonna start with my favorite books from Sharon Shin that I read this year, because I did have some high highs. My reading of Sharon Shin was a huge like theme for my year this year. I have a whole video of like tier ranking every book that I have read from her, talking about her series and my experience with her as an author, so I'll link that in the description if you want a more comprehensive view of my reading experience with Sharon Shin. But I do have a favorite from each series that I read from her in 2025. So my favorite book from the Elemental Blessing series was Troubled Waters. This is the first book, and what really got me like super hyped about her as an author. I think what I liked so much about this overall, Sharon Shin as an author, I just enjoy her writing a lot. It's just so readable. Her books are so fun. They're so easy to get into. I find her characters very fun most of the time, with a rare exception here and there. But overall, so readable, just really enjoyable. This is a really interesting world with an interesting, not exactly like religion, but kind of a philosophy of these elemental blessings that kind of rule and predict people's lives, and how that translates into their everyday life. I loved the main character in this, Zoe. She is truly a force of nature, both literally and figuratively. She has such a strong like just force of will going to you know, forge her life, but she also is going through grief, and so she's going through this real transformation of what is her life going to be after the death of her father. There is also a romance in this that I really enjoyed, and I think this is an example of Sharon Shin's romances at her best, which I think is when she does the type of romance that's just like a whisper of a romance, where for like most of the book you feel like, am I imagining that these two people like each other? Like nothing's happening, but I feel like there's tension, you know? And I think that those are really for her, that is her best type of romance, and that is certainly the way the romance is in this. It is very subtle, but I loved it and had so much fun reading this. And then my favorite book from her 12 Houses series is Shifter and Shadow, which actually came out in 2025. This is a little novella that she added to the series later on. This one is following the perspective of Donald, who is one of the main 6 like characters that we are following. Each book tells the kind of the love story for each of the characters in that group. And Donald is a very taciturn character. He doesn't talk a lot. He's a little standoffish with most of the other characters, although he's friends with all of them, but he really keeps to himself. A lot of times, he's a shapeshifter. A lot of times he's in the shape of a dog or a wolf anyway, so he doesn't talk a lot. So I loved getting his perspective in this one, and I think there are a few things that made this like really one of the best in the series. One is just that it was really interesting to get Donald's POV, since we don't know that much about him, since he doesn't talk a lot. Also, as a character, he is really one of those like still waters run deep kind of characters. You know, we're following his POV and get a little more insight into his thoughts and emotions, and honestly his like internal thoughts are surprisingly like romantic, and I really enjoyed getting that insight into his inner world. But also I think that this book in particular is just so perfectly scoped and paced for a novella. Like the amount of plot, character, and relationship development, the level of stakes, the amount of like emotional, you know, emotional change that happens throughout the story, everything just felt like it was so perfectly done for the amount of pages that we had. So I just felt like both on a character level and on a technical level, this was such a fantastic novella and addition to the series. So these were my favorite Sharon Shin books. Sharon Shin this year managed to get on both my best books of the year list and on my most disappointing books of the year list. So she is an author that I have thoroughly enjoyed reading, but I also feel like I can't really give just like a straight recommendation for, because I had some real high highs and low lows with her books. So it's a little inconsistent, but I so much enjoyed reading her in general and these two books in particular. Next is one of the first books that I read in 2025, and I kind of picked up on a whim, but it is Year of the Reaper by Makia Lucier, another author who was kind of a theme for the year. She has a lot fewer books, but I did read all of Makia Lucier's fantasy this year, and just so enjoyed reading from her. But this is the first one that I read, and what got me really excited about her as an author. It is standalone YA fantasy, and in this our main character is a young nobleman who has been captured. There's been a war going on between two countries. He was captured in a prison camp, but has recently escaped. He makes his way home, and when he gets there, there is almost immediately an assassination attempt. And so this is following him and some other characters as they are trying to figure out not just like who is trying to assassinate his, I think it's his niece, it's his brother's child, but also why, and that there may be some more nefarious things going on closer to home than they expect. But I just enjoy Makia Lucier so much. Another author that I think is just so readable. Her books are so easy to just eat right up, and I had so much fun with them. I enjoy her characters, and I also feel like her books all include some amount of like a mystery element to them, and I am not usually a mystery person. Like, I'm not gonna just be hooked on a mystery because it's a mystery, but I thoroughly enjoyed the mysteries in her books because I think, for one thing, there's such a good balance between like the plot and the characters. The mysteries are so intertwined with the characters, their relationships, their emotions, their past, and so that is kind of what hooks me on it, because it's still about the characters. And I find her mysteries just at the right level of figure out ability that I find fun. So I thoroughly enjoyed that. And also, this book in particular, I feel like is such a good standalone fantasy. Like, it's standalone high fantasy that is also really well like plotted and paced, and the amount of world building I think is enough to ground us in the world without going overboard. Like, it's not a very thick book, but it does a really good job of giving you everything you need, and having a really good like pace to it that I just had so much fun, and this completely sold me on Makia Lucier as an author. As I said, I went and read all of her other fantasy, and she's now an auto-read author for me if she comes out with any other fantasy in the future. Next is an author that I think at this point, on my channel at least, needs no introduction, which is Ankram. I just love Ankram. I think that every year she comes out with a book at this point, it ends up on one of my favorites of the year. This is not my #1 favorite of all of Ankram's books. I think that one still goes to Icarus, which I read last year, but The Corruption of Hollis Brown was a fantastic addition to her catalog of books. Ankram, another one that I love her writing. She tends to write in these like vignettes of just emotional intensity for her characters that just pulls you in. Her writing in this one in particular is so visceral because of the nature of the story. So this is following a boy in high school in a small town who feels like he's kind of listless, like there isn't really a point to anything, and he doesn't think he's really gonna go anywhere in his life. And he kind of picks fights with people at school just to feel something. But he accidentally one day makes a deal with a ghost who then possesses his body, and then he maybe falls in love with the ghost that's possessing him. So it's following this relationship building as these two consciousnesses exist in the same body. And so there is this kind of very like intimate and visceral nature to the story as they are just existing in this body together and getting to know each other and falling for each other. I have a review for this book that I will link in the description if you want to know more, but I always love Ankram's writing, her characters, her stories, her themes. She is an author that like every time I read the description for the book, I'm like, that doesn't sound like something I'm gonna like, and then I read it and I love it. So, you know, she can sell me on just about anything. And now we are down to my top 2 books. One of them is actually a series, but we're down to my top 2. So the first one I'm going to talk about is The Everlasting by Alix E. Harrow. This is one of my most anticipated releases for the year. It is a Lady Night book, and I loved this. This is one of those books that gets better as I think about it. Now, I wasn't as obsessed with it as I was kind of hoping to be, because there were some moments where I was not fully engaged with it, but overall, a fantastic book. Like, Alix E. Harrow, her writing in this, she writes with such clarity. Her characterization is so clear where she can like say a sentence and you just know this character. And I just loved the reading experience of reading her writing. I also think that the themes in this I absolutely loved. Her themes I think are not particularly subtle necessarily, but they also didn't feel like they were heavy-handed or like hitting you over the head with them. It just was really clear what she was getting at with this. And I absolutely adored it. It had so many themes around nationalism and propaganda and control of populace and storytelling. And I think that this is one of the most successful kind of books about the power of storytelling that I have seen. This involves time travel and like a time loop, because in it our main character, Owen Mallory, is a historian who is sent back in time over and over again to manipulate the past and manipulate the legend of the tragedy of Una Everlasting, who is this legendary figure, this lady knight who kind of shaped the national identity of the country Dominion in this world. And I gotta say, I don't enjoy time travel. I don't like time loops. That is not a trope that I like, and I usually actively avoid. However, I wanted to read this because I like Alix E. Harrow's writing and I love a lady knight. And I will say that the time loop part was like not my favorite, but there was so much about this that I loved that I just like didn't even care. That like the time loop couldn't even ruin it for me. I was just enjoying the writing and the themes of this so much. This is a book that I have so many thoughts and feelings and so many things to say that I feel like I want to do a standalone review for it, but I also feel like I can't because I'm just like, I have too many things to say. I don't know how to say it concisely or how to just articulate all of my feelings about it into one like review. But this is actually very different from what I was expecting it to be because one, I don't know if I fully knew that it was like a time travel, time loop story going into it, but also this was really like marketed as this like epic romance of like we're gonna find each other lifetime after lifetime, and that like that was the main thrust of the story, and that is certainly very present. It is following this relationship, but to me and my reading of it, I was like, that's not really what the book is about. The relationship is there as a vehicle to tell this greater story and deliver these themes, and that is really what I got out of it much more. Also, the vibes of the characters I think are just different and more melancholic than what I was expecting out of it, but I also loved that about it. I don't know if I can talk about this book articulately because I said I have so many just thoughts and feelings about it, and I just feel like every time I try to talk about it, it just is like, it's just too much. I don't know. But I loved this. This is also a book that I'm like, I will for sure reread this in the future. I think it will be even better on reread, and I am so excited to reread it. And my last one to tell you about is the Little Thieves series by Margaret Owen. This series just like, I don't know, it took me by storm this year. I picked it up just because I have some friends who have read it and liked it, and not even that they were like, oh, you'll like it, they enjoyed it, and I was like, sure, I want to read more YA this year, and I became obsessed with this series. The first book, I was kind of meh about the first half, and then I loved the second half, and then I became obsessed with books 2 and 3. Book 2 was probably my favorite. I found it maybe the most fun because it has the most like just awkward relationship stuff going on in it, which I really had fun with. But oh my god, book 3 was just the most emotions. This was a book that I started reading it and it was just stressing me out so much that I had to put it down for like a couple months because I love these characters so much. I am so invested in them, and in this third book they are so unhappy and they are just going through so much, and I just am like, like my favorite character is one of those people where I'm like, when he's unhappy, I am dying inside, and I just couldn't handle it, and I was so stressed by this. I had to like put it down and come back to it a couple months later. So overall, like this is a series that I didn't necessarily rate every single book in the series 5 stars, but it is a 5-star series. This just so many emotions, so much stress. I don't think I have felt this emotional about a book or series in a while, and I loved it, even if it was very stressful to me. I have a whole review for this series or talk about like more detail about what the series is about, why I loved it, the themes in it, because it's not even just that I love the characters and that there is a romance in this that I'm really invested in, but I also think there's some really fantastic character development that is not linear, and it makes it very like complex, and part of why there's so much like heartache in this, because there are characters who have so much growth that they need to go through, but it is so messy and it's so painful, and it just is so much. And it also just, I think, has some really fantastic themes in it as well, and I loved this. I am obsessed with it. It's definitely one of my favorite things that I read this year. Another one that I will definitely be rereading this series. I actually listened to the whole series on audiobook, and the audiobooks are fantastic. But I then went and bought the physical books because I know that I am going to reread these, and whether I read them physically or listen to the audiobooks again, I want to be able to like annotate and underline, because there's just so much in this that I have so many feelings about that I need to reread them and write in the books as I am reading them. And I feel like this is another one that, because I love them so much, I am somehow less articulate about why I love them and what is so great. So please go watch my series review. I'll link it in the description. I think I had myself together a little bit better in that video and was better able to explain what's going on with this series and why I love it. But this is certainly one of the best things that I read in 2025. So those are my best books of the year for 2025. Please let me know in the comments what was one of your best books of the year. I would love to know. But thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye.